How zero almost destroyed civilization. It was just a symbol, a circle, nothing inside. And yet, for centuries, people feared it more than any other number. Zero feels ordinary today, but its existence once threatened the foundations of mathematics, trade, and belief itself. To understand why, we have to return to a world that functioned without it. A world where numbers counted things that physically existed, and nothingness had no place in calculation. In that world, math was concrete, visible, and safely limited. Early civilizations counted sheep, land, and time using marks and symbols that always meant something tangible. Every number pointed to an object, something you could touch. The idea of representing nothing felt meaningless, even dangerous. How could absence deserve symbol? How could nothing be treated as something? At first, zero appeared quietly, not as a number, but as a placeholder, a way to show absence between digits. It helped scribes avoid confusion when writing large values. But even this small role caused unease. A mark that represented emptiness felt like a crack in reality. Some cultures accepted it cautiously. Others rejected it entirely. As trade expanded and calculations grew more complex, the pressure increased. Merchants needed faster arithmetic. Astronomers needed precise models. The old systems struggled. And slowly, zero began demanding a larger role, not just as a gap, but as a value that could change outcomes. That was the moment fear took hold. Because once zero became a number, it rewrote the rules. It allowed subtraction to erase quantities completely. It made debts visible. It exposed the idea that value could vanish. And for societies built on certainty and hierarchy, that idea was deeply unsettling. Zero was no longer harmless. It was a challenge to how the world understood order, value, and meaning itself. Resistance to zero was not just mathematical. It was philosophical and emotional. In many cultures, nothingness was associated with chaos, void, or spiritual danger. To give it a symbol felt like inviting instability into systems that relied on balance and control. Numbers were meant to measure reality, not question its existence. Where zero did appear, it often arrived through necessity rather than acceptance. Astronomers tracking planetary motion found their calculations collapsing without a way to represent absence precisely. Accountants managing growing trade networks struggled to reconcile losses and debts using older number systems. The math worked only until it didn't. As zero gained traction, it exposed uncomfortable truths. With it, negative numbers became meaningful. Debts could be written clearly. Losses could no longer be hidden behind vague accounting. Power structures that depended on ambiguity suddenly faced transparency. And transparency threatened authority. This was why some institutions pushed back hard. In parts of medieval Europe, zero and the number systems that relied on it were treated with suspicion. They were labeled foreign, untrustworthy, even deceptive. Traditional numerals were considered safer because they were harder to manipulate. Zero made calculation fast, too fast, and speed meant power could shift. But once merchants experienced its advantages, there was no return. Calculations that once took hours became simple. Large numbers became manageable. Patterns emerged where confusion once ruled. Zero didn't just simplify math, it amplified it. Still, the tension remained. Zero erased quantities effortlessly. It could turn wealth into nothing with a single subtraction. It introduced the unsettling idea that value was not permanent, and as societies grew more complex, that idea became impossible to ignore. Zero was no longer a concept on trial. It was a force reshaping how civilization counted, traded, and understood loss itself. As zero embedded itself deeper into mathematics, its true disruptive power became clear. It did not merely add a new symbol. It transformed how numbers behaved. Multiplication could now erase entire quantities. Division faced an impossible question. What happens when you divide by nothing? This was more than a technical issue. It exposed the boundary in logic itself. Some operations simply stopped working. Rules that felt universal suddenly had exceptions. Mathematics, once viewed as a perfectly sealed system, revealed a fragile edge where meaning collapsed. The introduction of zero also accelerated abstraction. Numbers no longer had to represent physical objects. They could represent ideas, balances, and potential. Wealth could exist on paper. Debt could exist without a physical form. Entire economies began operating on symbols rather than goods. And zero sat quietly at the center of it all. This shift created instability. Systems grew powerful, but also vulnerable. A single error, a missing digit, or an incorrect zero could erase fortunes. Ledgers became weapons. Accounting became strategy. Control moved toward those who understood the symbols best. Yet, the conflict went deeper than economics. Zero-force thinkers confront the idea of nothingness directly. Philosophers debated whether absence could exist at all. Theologians argued about creation from nothing. Mathematicians wrestled with infinities that now stretched in both directions. Zero opened doors that could not be closed. What made this moment so unsettling was its inevitability. Once zero proved useful, rejection became impossible. Civilization could not advance without it. The same symbol that frightened societies was now essential to their survival. Zero had crossed the point of no return, and in doing so, it rewired how humanity understood value, absence, and possibility itself. The moment zero became unavoidable, civilization changed direction. Math was no longer just a tool for counting what existed. It became a language for describing what could disappear. That single shift altered trade, science, and thought itself. With zero in place, mathematics gained symmetry and power. Equations balanced. Systems scaled. Complex calculations became possible without collapsing under their own weight. The symbol that once represented fear now represented stability, but that stability came with a cost. Zero made fragility visible. It showed how quickly abundance could vanish, how easily systems could fall back to nothing. Over time, societies learned to live with that truth. Banks, technology, and science were built on symbols that meant absence as much as presence. Digital worlds now depend on streams of zeros guiding everything behind the scenes. The number that once terrified civilizations became the backbone of modern life. Zero did not destroy civilization, but it forced humanity to confront uncertainty head-on. It taught that value is not permanent, that balance can be lost, and that systems must be designed with disappearance in mind. That lesson still echoes today in markets, technology, and decisions made at every scale. What began as a forbidden symbol ended as a silent architect of the modern world. A reminder that even nothing can change everything. Sometimes the smallest shift in perspective becomes the beginning of a new future.